inside the bulletin, because if you look at it, it looks pretty busy for today. We do have a lot of work to do. But chapter 4 is a crucial chapter, because this is what I want to remind you, and this is what I believe something like Tuesday probably is of relevancy for you and I. We live in a time and age where when you look at the screen, unavoidably, some of these images that you get to see right now, they are creating, they are shaping, they are defining who we are as a culture. So you go from the amazing Spider-Man that just came out Friday, number 2, obviously. You got the Avengers, you have Captain America, came out, the new one, obviously. Okay, and you got multiple of these movies that they're just either came out or they will be continuation of some of those that had already came in the past. Now, what I want you to see through some of these films that some of you may be familiar, some of you may remember because you read the actual comic books back in the day. Well, now they're movies, obviously. There's a common denominator that I want you to think with me for a second. And the common denominator that obviously is reminded to us is that we are a culture that we are driven. We hunger superheroes. We love superheroes. We love individuals that will stay above, that will stand above the average. Most people, we're drawn to experiences that have to do with challenging the status quo. The book of Hebrews gives us a real superhero. Now this is important to us because what we have said for the last basically 6 weeks, this is our 7th week, is that we have described what is called the supremacy of Jesus Christ. Christ being above every single thing and every single one. The only thing that separates Jesus from any of these cartoon characters, any of these cultural images that, again, I believe they are shaping our culture. They're literally creating the future where we're supposed to be and go in many aspects, is that Jesus was and is supreme. He is above everything else. And when we studied this for the last 6 weeks, we discovered that His supremacy is something that He shares with us. His supremacy is something that He has empowered us to live and to experience. So part of the conversation today, we have to understand that Jesus' supremacy is to restore what was lost back in Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, we decided to become supreme. We decided to run our own show. And from that point forward, humanity, culture, the world suffered. Not only from a human perspective, but even from creation. And what you see through Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago is that He not only restores our relationship with God, but that relationship with God gets restored when humans, when men and women, when we are taken back into our place of purpose and origin. So one of the things that you have heard from me in the past, and I'm going to say it one more time, is the fact that we were created to have dominion. When you look at the book of Genesis, we're supposed to subdue the earth. We're supposed to have this sense of dominion over creation. The only thing that you got to remember with this statement of dominion is that dominion in the scriptures, in Jesus, is the climax of exemplification of what I'm about to tell you, is that dominion only comes in the context of submission. So Jesus said it multiple times through the gospel. If you want to be the first one, you're going to be if you want to be the greatest, you're going to be the servant. I mean, this is a conversation through the entire gospel of how Jesus portrayed that He becomes King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Part of this has to do with His sacrificial lifestyle. So think for a second, because again, culture in a certain way, because culture doesn't know any better, and culture does not approach life through the lenses of the scriptures, culture typically gives you a list of superheroes that you're seeing on the screen, and the purpose of these superheroes apparently is to put themselves above everybody else, otherwise it would be superheroes. But this sense of heroism has to do with a sense of functioning culture, not necessarily empowerment to others. When it comes to the presence of Jesus, when it comes to, again, the supremacy of Christ, the supremacy of Christ has to do with us not just claiming and holding on to Jesus because he is supreme, but the fact that he has also put us in that context of supremacy. So now, watch this. Now we have said from day one, now we're not only the ones under the high priest, which is something that we have emphasized from chapter 3, now in chapter 4 we're moving forward. That's the supremacy of the high priest, but also he's also our brother. He is supreme, he's above us, he's our mediator, but he is also our brother. Now, in the context of the scriptures, again, I want you to look at what the Bible teaches. Because when you go to chapter 4, beginning of verse 1, the Bible gives you a huge warning when it comes to this understanding of the supremacy of Christ, and continues the challenge to help us understand why is it that we are doing what we're doing. So beginning of verse 1, the Bible says the following: therefore, after chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, that I hope you have taken the time to read, or to at least engage in the conversation with us, he says, therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, hasn't shut down, hasn't closed down, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. Obviously, the implication is that it's still open, and I explained this to you last time because of the rest, and we utilize we'll look at the context of the pilgrimage of the people of God through the wilderness. So on your handouts, here's what I want you to know or remember. When verse 1 begins with this, again, warning of the word therefore, really the translation means be careful. This is a huge warning to be very careful. So on your handouts, I'm asking you to write the word justice and the word grace. And here is what I want you to hear me speak about the supremacy of Christ. The supremacy of Jesus, Jesus being, according to chapter 1 and chapter 2, above the angels and above Moses, above the law, by being a new covenant, not the old covenant, but the new covenant, has to begin with the understanding that Jesus allows us to see life differently. What does that mean? Well, think about for a second. People who do not embrace the supremacy of Jesus, they always begin the conversation by a just definition, by default, assuming that they deserve grace. Now, yesterday I was listening to a conversation, and through the conversation that I listened to, the question was brought with this college young lady that has a college friend, who the college friend knew that the lady, this young lady, 21-year-old, is in college, and she is a Christian. And this college friend tells this other lady, who is a Christian, says, hey, there is no way that God will send me to hell or condemn me for being homosexual since God created me this way. Have you heard that argument before? So the question came from this young lady. How do I answer? How do I reply to my friend who really believes that God created her this way? And here is how the conversation begins. If you're going to begin again, you're going to start with the supremacy of Christ. The reality is that God is not going to send you to hell because you are a homosexual. The reality is that everybody is going to hell because we are sinners. Period. Meaning, here's what I'm trying to tell you. Even though the Bible opposes homosexuality, what I'm trying to tell you, according to the scriptures, specifically with this warning from Hebrews 1, is that we are not sinners because of the things that we do. We do the things that we do because we are sinners. So whether you are a homosexual, whether you are heterosexual, regardless of your sexual preferences, without Christ is what? Your history. There's no hope for you. So whether you are in the traditional, typical, man and a woman type of marriage, which we're trying to emphasize with you, Whether you are a single person, whether you are single again, whether you're going to be married, regardless, those things are pointless if you do not understand that every one of us deserves hell. The conversation does not begin by, again, assuming that you and I deserve heaven. The conversation always begins if Jesus is supreme, and if Jesus is above the angels, if Jesus has brought a brand new covenant, you cannot begin the conversation assuming that you deserve heaven. Because if that's the case, watch this, if that's the case, that will set you up for deception. Because you and I know that it's a matter of time that we're going to go through the valley of the shadow of death. It's a matter of time. You're going to experience some things in life that they do not make any sense. You're going to go through some things that are literally going to take your heart and just crash it. And you're going to feel that life has been sucked out of your very own soul, and you don't know how to respond to that. See, this is why the conversation with Jesus Christ, if He is supreme, if we're going to embrace that He is above everything else, we have to begin with the understanding that we deserve the justice of God. So last week, when we went through chapter 3, we talked about, and the writer of Hebrews spoke about the issue, how the generation that left Egypt did not enter His rest. Meaning, they didn't make it to the promised land. Now here's the question. Was God unfair by not allowing all this 2.7 million people approximately not to enter? And especially, does it bother you that Moses, the man of the hour, the leader, the one that actually spoke directly to God, he doesn't get to make it to the promised land? So here's the question to you. When you hear that story, because that's what chapter 3 reminded us, that you got to remain faithful or you may not enter. See, watch verse 1 again. See, the promise of entering His rest still stands. But, here's the warning. Let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen. In other words, that you broke the covenant. Otherwise, you won't make it. So again, the question is, here's the question. By God not allowing this generation to enter the promised land, was that justice or was that injustice? See, the justice of God, that's where the conversation begins, is that God always gives what we deserve. But the mercy of God says that God does not give us what we deserve. He gives us what we need. Are you following me on this? This is a huge statement because this is when you look at Jesus Christ and you have to be marveled at His grace. You have to understand that by you having the ability to breathe your next breath is grace and grace alone. That when you woke up this morning and saw the beautiful, beautiful morning, for some of you it was still dark, maybe, I don't know, whenever you woke up, that was grace. Are you following me? You actually putting your feet on the floor, on the ground, and being able to get up from the bed was grace. So the moment that you wake up and you open your eyes and you breathe, well, you've been breathing throughout the night, but you continue breathing and you assume that you deserve that breath, that you deserve that air in your lungs. See, you're in trouble. You're basically saying, I am supreme, Jesus is not supreme, I am the point of the whole story, and I deserve all this, and you better, God, you better give me what I think you should give me. And I think that sense of arrogance, that sense of understanding is what actually God, the generation described in chapter 3, without entering the promised land. So, the gospel basically says this. Here are the 4 things that I believe the word rest in this verse 1 implies. Number 1 is God's rest. Obviously, God always models what He expects us to do. And on the 7th day, the Bible says that He took a break. He created for 6 days, and then He rested. Then the Bible also implies, within this context, is the rest of Joshua. And that's what we've been talking about, is basically entering the promised land. Out of the millions of people that came out of Egypt, only 2 individuals made it to the promised land or entered the rest. Caleb and Joshua. That's it. No one else. Everybody else has stayed. Well, I said from the generation who left Egypt. Obviously, the children entered the promised land.